I'm going to show you Exhibit 20.
Okay, so it would be the area of Barelas is going to be an 8th Street.
Okay. Did you go out to that location yourself?
I did not.
Okay. Were you aware that's where this Jeep was located?
Yes.
How did you come to find that out?
So crime scene specialist Sarah Oates actually responded to this location. They assist with us often in our crime scenes. So she actually was requested to come to this location where the vehicle was found, photograph it, and then seal and tow the vehicle back to the crime lab so that we could perform a search warrant on it.
Okay. To your knowledge, was there a search warrant being executed on or around this area as well?
Yes.
Okay. So even though you didn't go to that crime scene itself, you mentioned something about sealing and towing the vehicle. What do you mean by sealing and towing?
So when they find the condition of the vehicle, we call it a seal and tow. They're going to put evidence tape on all of the seals of the doors, basically, or windows. Anything that can be opened, and that's just to protect it, to say that no one has entered into that vehicle until the search warrant has been signed and approved by a judge. So those items, say it's a roll down window, they're going to tape up that window so that it's completely secured.
And towing it where?
They would tow it to the crime lab. So they would tow it into our facility. We have a large garage in the back portion of our lab. We have a parking lot back there basically, and it will be towed to that location because it is a secured lot until we do have that warrant in hand.
Okay. I'm going to show you another series of photographs from starting at 70 through 95 in sequential order. Right?
Just 80 is missing.
80 is missing because we went out of order on that one. Correct.
And what's the last number on that one?
95.
Okay.
So 70 through 95 except for 80, which was already admitted. So if you can review these before we put them on the Elmo and tell me if you recognize them.
I reviewed them before and I do recognize these.
Okay. And what are those photographs of?
These are going to be the execution of the warrant for the Jeep Cherokee.
Okay. And who took those photographs?
I did.
Okay. And were you the only one who was executing the search warrant?
No, I did have other detectives that were assisting me. However, they were at my direction of what they were doing.
Okay. So when you say executing the search warrant and processing the Jeep, is it essentially the same thing?
Yes, executing the search warrant would be actually entering into the vehicle, and then processing would be looking for any evidence that might be inside.
Okay. And are those fair and accurate depictions of
Yes.
photographs that you took on the day that you executed that Jeep, that search warrant to process that Jeep?
Yes, that was on December 3rd.
December 3rd. Okay, so let me ask you this before we start getting into this, just for technicality's sake. You're advised of the Jeep being there on November 27th, but then you're not executing the warrant until December 3rd.
Correct. So photographs were taken of the Jeep of where it was located, and then evidence was located at that scene. That evidence was then transferred to me. It does take a while to get a warrant approved, and I'm not sure what the delay was. It could have been the weekend, and I can't remember if that was before or after the Thanksgiving holiday.
And what steps do you take to ensure that the evidence remains intact in the interim between the time that a vehicle is sealed and towed off of a property and taken to the garage to be processed?
So again, it would be completely sealed with evidence markers showing date and who sealed the vehicle, and then also again placed into our secured lot. For instance, on this particular case, the vehicle is actually stored inside a garage.
So it would be
So
subject to
it-
the elements.
Correct, no elements, no citizens walking around. It would be, and it's completely monitored and secured with a security key, basically pass it only lab personnel has access to.
So at this time, the state's going to move into evidence 70 through 95, save number 81?
80.
80, excuse me.
Defense counsel, any objection?
No objection.
Okay, the court will admit states exhibit 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95 into evidence at this time, and you may publish.
Thank you, Judge. So let's start with the first one, number 77.
Yes, 70.
All right, you have a big old target around the front of that Jeep, or plastic sheet, I guess.
Yes,
Did you put that there?
I did not.
Who put that there?
That was going to be crime scene specialist Sarah Oates.
Why are you putting a big old plastic tarp over that? Are you trying to hide it?
No, usually, so in this instance, it was missing items or parts of the Cherokee. So the front portion and the fenders, and it appears like even possibly the hood is then been removed from the vehicle. So in order to properly enclose all the items that were inside, plastic was placed over it with duct tape securing it, and then you can also possibly see initials of who sealed that vehicle to keep it the way that it was found.
Okay, so it's like a big old bag.
Correct.
All right, let's go to the next one.
71 is going to be the backside of the Jeep Cherokee, so a photograph of the trunk compartment area.
And there's little tape
Right.
slits over the
So
back
those
window.
are the little markers that I was talking about. So these seals are placed on the frame itself, and then any items that could be open. So this back window could be open. So markers were placed on here, or tape, should I say stickers. It'll have the date and then the person that sealed that vehicle, their initials on it.
Now, typically, we're looking at this Jeep, there's no license plate on the back. Does somebody remove the license plate from law enforcement when vehicles are brought in to be processed, or are they processed just as they are found?
They're
License
processed,
plate and all?
right, they're processed the way they are found, so that's how it was located.
Okay.
With
Is
no
there
license
was there a plate, like in the window, you know how we do in New Mexico sometimes, we'll just slap a plate anywhere?
Right, I don't remember seeing that,
Okay, so just as it is right now,
correct. I don't remember seeing a temp tag or anything like that, it was removed.
okay. And the rear of the vehicle seems otherwise to be reasonably intact. I mean, nothing has been removed from the eye that we could tell.
Yes,
Okay, let's go to the next one. What is this?
this is going to be the roof of the Jeep Cherokee. It appears that most Jeep Cherokees, depending on the model, have a luggage rack, and the luggage rack has been removed. So these are just to show screws that were on top of the hood, and then you can also see the tape and initials by Sarah Oates,
Okay.
and the date, 11/27.
Can I ask the jury if they can see that, because it's a little hard. Yeah, go. Let me show you this, detective. I'm going to show you Exhibit 9, which has been previously admitted. Do you recognize that?
It's a photograph of a Jeep Cherokee.
And does this appear to be the same Cherokee that you processed?
It does appear to be the same with some of the details or some of the items on the Jeep Cherokee removed.
Like what?
So the luggage rack was removed when I photographed and executed the search warrant, so this was no longer present. The fenders as well, the front fenders and the hood were also removed when the execution of the warrant was done by myself.
We have a two-tone on this particular Jeep on the doors. Do you remember seeing that two-tone on the Jeep that you processed?
I do not remember that.
Is there any images in the exhibits that we have that would help you? If not, we can start.
It's kind of a dark photo. Item 91 is a little dark, but it appears that there is still molding on the bottom side.
Okay. And we're going to go a little bit out of order for the purposes of this exercise. Let me show you this. Yeah, approach. This hasn't been admitted yet, so let's not put it under the Elmo just yet.
Okay.
Recognize that image?
Yes.
What is that image of?
The vehicle that I did process, and that was going to be located at 437 Pacific.
Okay. Does that help answer my previous question about there being a two-tone?
Yes, there was a two-tone molding on the bottom half.
Okay. And for purposes of this exercise, Judge, I am going to move 110 into evidence right now, and then we can bring it up later again.
Okay, and defense, any objection?
Which exhibit number again?
110.
110, okay. No objection.
Okay, the court will admit state's exhibit number 110 into evidence and you may publish.
Thank you.
So that's going to be a side photograph of the Cherokee at Pacific, the way that it was located. Again, you can see that the front portion of the vehicle has been removed. That's when that giant plastic would be placed over it prior to us sealing and towing it. And then the windows are open as well. So plastic will be placed on that because we do not enter that vehicle until the search warrant has been signed. So any compartments that are open will be sealed, and that's what Sarah Oates did.
And back to my question about the two-tone, is this a better image to show you? And first of all, let me ask, is this the same Jeep that you took to the garage?
Yes, it is.
And is it more visible on that two-tone paint that I was asking about on the doors?
Yes.
Can you just point that out to the jury in case?
So it's going to be this color here and then down here.
Got it, thank you.
Or down here and up here.
Perfect. And let's take this one back too. All right, let's get back in order again. What number are we on now?
Number 73.
Okay, let's go to 73.
This is going to be a close-up photograph of the screws that were attached or not attached from the luggage rack area.
What do you mean by that?
So there were some screws that were still attached here, but there were some missing that appeared to have been removed. When the luggage rack was removed, you could still even see some discoloration here as well.
So let me ask you this, because I'm not sure I follow, but I think we can clarify this. This looks like it's an Allen wrench type of screw head.
Correct.
Is there also threading within that? I guess we're going to call it a rivet?
Yes, there is threading in there.
Okay, and so looking at this side, which would be for the record to the left of it, the other screw, there's clearly a head there. Do you remember what kind of, is this like a Phillips or is it?
I believe it was a Phillips, but it also had the same backing down here.
Right. So it stands to reason that this would have the same threading going down that rivet.
Correct. And it was, so just to back up a little bit, Sarah Oates located a number of items at Pacific, one of them being a screw that was similar to this.
Okay.
So when I processed the vehicle, I did notice that some of the screws that were at one point, I believe, attached to the luggage rack had been missing and possibly thought that they were discarded there at 437 Pacific.
Okay. Let's go to the next image.
74.
Here's a close-up. You can see those threadings that I was mentioning before in the previous.
Yes,
Okay.
you can see the discoloration too of something that was possibly there.
So in the shape of possibly that roof rack that we were looking at in the previous exhibit.
Some type of molding or something that was on there, yes.
Okay. Next.
75 is just another photograph.
Looks like those are two different.
This one
versions now.
is the missing one, and this one it appears to be broken off.
So the screw itself that was screwed in there maybe was over tightened or however it broke off.
Correct, the head of it was broken.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
76, another photograph of that same side so that you could see the broken portion and then another screw there.
Okay, next image.
77 is going to be the front of the Jeep, missing the bumper and the hood.
Okay. Let me ask you a little bit about the front of the Jeep because it's kind of hard to catch here, but I think it's visible. Where would the bumper typically be on a Jeep like this, the exterior bumper?
Down in this area.
Okay. Does it appear, or did you note that it appeared to be indented or damaged in any way when you looked at it?
I did not. It was
Okay.
just photographed, but I didn't note that.
Looking at it
in my
now, does it
report.
appear to be misshapen to you or not uniform?
A little bit here on the bottom,
Okay,
but it's hard to tell with this photograph.
sure. And you can look at this one too if it helps, the actual live photograph, I don't know. Looking at sort of around the front of the wheel where the bumper covers the front wheels,
Yes.
do they appear to be parallel or equal in shape?
This one appears to be damaged, so it'd be the right passenger side appears to be more damaged than the driver's side.
Okay. Let's go to the next image.
This is going to be Exhibit 78, so it's missing the front fender, and you can see doesn't look too much damage there on that bumper side, on the driver's side.
And the dirt on the tire, presumably because it was resting at a dirt lot.
Correct.
Okay.
You can see foliage, so leaves already in the hood or the engine bay. This is going to be on the passenger side.
What number are we talking about?
That's going to be Exhibit 79.
Okay.
This clearly looks more damaged than the other side. So that front fender is kind of smashed in, and then also the right side of the bumper.
So we have more crumpling of the metal and plastic around there.
Yes.
Okay.
Item 81 is just going to be our tent, which was indicator M200, which stands for miscellaneous. That's going to be for this screw here.
Okay. Next number.
This is going to be Exhibit 82. Again, just another photograph of M200.
Why do you put tents on items such as this? Like, what's the point of that?
Just so that we know exactly what items we're collecting, and then when we place it in a bag, we're able to identify what that is. So, say I'm taking several of these, I want to know where M200 was collected from. So say it was the driver's side. If I collect M201 and it's on the passenger side, I can keep them separate and know exactly where that item came from.
So if you wanted to do any testing on something like this, we would have a designation to it?
That's correct. This is going to be the VIN of that number since the vehicle, and this is Exhibit 83 since we did not have a license plate.
Okay. And it is intact?
Yes, it is. 84, just a photograph of the rim and the rear driver's side.
Now on the rim, it looks, looking at the tires, that it's hard to tell because they're so low profile, but is that tire flat?
It
Do
is.
you remember it being flat?
I remember it. I don't know if it is flat or not. I can't remember which tires were flat because they were low profile.
Okay. Do you remember if any were actually flat, or
I
did
don't.
you make a note of that?
I don't remember.
Okay. And there's also a seal, going back to that
Okay.
image, and we're still on number 84, a seal on the gas tank as well.
That's correct. So again, we seal all openings to the vehicle.
Okay.
This is going to be 85.
Okay, what are we looking at here?
So this is going to be the rear seat with it partially removed of the Jeep Cherokee on the driver's side. And what I'm trying to take a photograph of is this casing that's located and wedged underneath this area.
How did you find that?
So when we do vehicle searches, we look every crack that we possibly can of where evidence might fall into. So I believe on this particular one, we did remove the back seat, and then look at all those areas, whether it could have, you're driving around and something falls in between the seats or in by the seat belts, and so we're looking at every area where anything could have fallen. So the back seat was removed, and then near the seat belt area, that's where we located that casing.
Let me ask you this, did you find any other casings inside the vehicle?
No.
When you processed the vehicle, you had mentioned before that when it was found in Pacific, it was photographed with the windows open. And so when you brought it back to the crime lab, you kept the windows open but sealed it up, correct?
Correct. So it's still sealed until we are able to open into that vehicle.
Okay. Did it have any kind of smell to it at that point when you were processing it? Did it smell like cleaner or filth or bubblegum or anything else?
I don't remember.
Okay. And which seat are we talking about here? Where would this have been?
The rear
The rear?
bench seat.
Okay. No other casings were found, so this was clearly had fallen back or
Yes,
wedged itself back there, not visible to the naked eye had you not torn it apart.
that's correct.
Okay.
Exhibit 86. This is going to be with our little evidence tent showing C200, which represents casing number 200.
Okay.
87 of the casing, 200.
Okay.
And 88, that's a 40 caliber Smith & Wesson head stamp.
And let's put a pause in that so I can get another piece of evidence for one more, please. May I approach?
You may.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as 98. You recognize it?
I do.
What is it?
This is going to be casing 200 that was located. I'm sorry. This is actually going to be the casing that was located at Pacific.
Oh,
So it's in
my mistake.
wrong one.
Wrong one. I should have read the before I grab it. Let me show you 99. Hold on, let's not get anything confused.
This is going to be the casing that was collected inside the Jeep on the bench seat, driver's side.
And is it the same casing that correlates to exhibit 88
Yes, it is.
and 87?
Yes, it is.
State moves into evidence exhibit, what number is it?
99.
99.
99.
Any objection from defense?
No objection, yes.
Okay, the court will admit state's exhibit number 99 into evidence, and you may publish.
All right, you can just put it on. And first, the condition of this casing as well.
Pristine as well. It's not bent or damaged in any way.
And the caliber.
It's a 40 caliber.
All right. But is it the same kind of casing as what we looked at?
The brand is different.
The brand is different?
Yes. So the other one
For
is
97?
right. The other one, 97, is a brass, and it's a different brand. And then this is Spear, and it is this nickel color.
Thank you.
this is 89, and this is gonna be a photograph of the front passenger door.
Okay. And it appears as though the windows are pretty dark tint.
Yes.
Was that the case all the way around the Jeep?
I don't remember if it was all of them were that heavily tinted. By looking at the photographs, it appears to be that they were all dark,
Okay.
but I don't remember exactly.
All right. In looking at this photograph, I mean, can you tell the level of darkness on the tint?
Just that it's dark.
Okay. You can't give us that.
No, I don't know what the percentage is anymore, but it is definitely dark. You
Okay.
can see that you can't see, even with the flash, what's behind,
Yeah. See a
as you
little-
can see here.
Maybe a
in the
little there
garage.
on that post behind it, but not much.
Right, you can barely see the post.
Okay, thank you.
90, and this is going to be a photograph of the driver's side with the door open.
All right.
91, rear driver's side.
And why did you put markings on the window like that?
Again, this is just to show when and where and how many seals and what was used, and then also the initials and their MAT number as to who processed this vehicle and sealed it to the lab.
Okay, next one.
92, this is just when we collect evidence, we photograph the envelope prior to putting in the evidence into the envelope so that we know exactly what this item is.
Okay.
This is M200, so it's coming from that rear driver's side rooftop. And then this is the screw that was collected of M200, and that's Exhibit 93. Exhibit 94 is going to be the head stamp of that screw.
Ah,
So it is a star pattern.
yeah, I was gonna say it's not a Phillips head, it's actually
Correct.
a star.
That's a star pattern on that. And then 95 was that casing. So again, the evidence bag that we would collect it in.
Okay. Let me ask you this now. I think that's the last of our photos.
Yes.
Photograph. What other steps do you take to process this vehicle besides just photographing it?
We do swabs for DNA, and then we also do latents for any type of fingerprint that we might locate.
Are you just like randomly swabbing for DNA like around the headlights or?
No, we swab any areas that might be potentially touched, whether it be the hatchback lever, the steering column, the gear shift, the front driver door, the interior of the driver door, the sunroof,
So anywhere you might,
anything that you
put your
might
hands.
touch.
I see. And so what did you swab particularly in this case?
I remember the interior compartments of the vehicle, the steering wheel, the gear shift, I think even the gas tank lever, and then also the hatchback of the vehicle
Okay.
and the stereo compartment area.
What's the purpose of swabbing?
Just to locate any potential DNA that has been transferred. Anybody that's removing items or within that vehicle touching those surfaces, we're hoping for some type of touch DNA that we can analyze and find out exactly who it belongs to.
And so did you submit these items for analysis?
We did, or I did.
Did it bear any fruit?
Inconclusive.
Inconclusive, what does that mean?
They couldn't narrow it down to one person. It appears that there might have been several, but it's not enough for an ID.
Okay. To your understanding, I mean, well, have you ever tried to swab something that has been bleached or cleaned with bleach?
Blood swabs, we
This-
will attempt.
What does bleach do to blood swabs or DNA?
It destroys the item, basically. So any profile that we would be able to get, it literally destroys the DNA.
What about just even glass cleaner sometimes? Or any other chemical?
It might also destroy it as well.
So is DNA, to your understanding, sort of a fragile little flower?
That's correct.
Okay. And according to your report, it looks as though blind swabs, there was quite a number of blind swabs. Do you remember how many in total you ended up taking?
I think in total for the entire case might have been upward of 38, 40 swabs that were collected.
Okay. Is there anything else about that, the processing of that vehicle that I haven't asked you that comes to mind
No.
that was part of your investigation? No?
No.
Okay. Did you attend the autopsy for Jacqueline Vigil?
I did not.
Okay. Were you aware that one had been done?
Yes, I was aware one had been done.
Okay. Do you know if any evidentiary items related to ballistics or projectiles were collected?
Yes, there were.
What was that?
Projectile. So the Office of the Medical Investigator, once the autopsy is complete, whatever the doctor locates and also the garments that they're wearing, anything of that nature, is then picked up by our office as well. So we go to the Office of the Medical Investigator. You saw that brown bag with the hat. All of the items are packaged individually. So the hat was packaged individually, her leggings, her tennis shoes, anything of that nature. When they did the autopsy, the doctor did locate a projectile and a few fragments. Those items were then placed in an envelope and then also delivered with all her property. This also includes any personal property, whether it be a driver's license or jewelry or anything of that nature. Those items are all then tagged into evidence by myself, and then I submit a service request for any of our lab personnel to assist us in determining what that evidence means. So in this particular case, I did submit a service request to the firearms unit. I wanted to find out what the caliber of that projectile and if they could determine what type of weapon was used.
Okay. So other than, and we'll get back to that service request in a minute, what were the service requests that you made in total? Do you recall? And if you want to look at your report.
I did the service request for latents to be looked at, and then also all the DNA swabs that we collected, whether it be from the tire or from the Jeep itself, to be looked at and to be analyzed.
And when you say latents, what are you talking about?
Fingerprints.
Were you able to extract any fingerprint markings from the vehicle?
We did do some lifts, but it's my understanding that nothing came back to anyone.
You're talking about the Jeep, right?
The Jeep, the Jeep, and then also the Cadillac was also powdered as well.
Okay. And did any come back to San Vigil?
I believe some did, but I can't remember exactly how many.
But as to anyone else, it was?
No, yeah.
Okay.
Inconclusive on those as well.
Inconclusive. Now we're going to go back for a minute to ask a few more questions about this area. So I'm going to show you what's been marked and admitted as Exhibit 57, 60, 61, and 62. Let's start with 57. So, did you have an understanding of what, after you had done your service requests, did you get results back from those service requests from Firearm Toolbox?
Yes.
Okay. And to your knowledge, was there a determination made as to the likely type of gun that was used or correlated to the shell casing?
Yes.
What was that?
That was a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson M&P.
Okay. So assuming that this is a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson S&P that ejected this shell casing, are you familiar with that type of weapon at all?
Yes, I am.
How so?
I also, on duty, have been assigned a Smith & Wesson M&P. However, mine is not a .40 caliber, but it is a 9mm.
Okay. Is there, other than caliber or size, is there a difference between the 9mm and the .40? To your
No,
knowledge?
no.
Are you familiar with the .40?
Not really. Not too much.
So let's take this step by step. Smith & Wesson is the maker or the company.
Correct.
40 caliber is the size,
Correct.
and then you said it was an M&P
That's the model type.
model. So if we're talking about cars, it would be like a Honda Civic LX, right?
Sure.
Okay.
So they're other than the caliber is different, but they all fire the same. Maybe the trigger is still the same, but the ejection side is also the same.
Okay. Which side does your firearm eject from?
On the right.
Right? So,
If I am standing and I shoot the firearm,
yeah, pretend this is a gun. Just hold it like a gun. If you're shooting it, which way is it going to eject from?
it's going to go to the right.
Okay. So, looking at this picture then, on 57,
Yes.
if the projectile comes to rest here,
I would expect the shooter is on the other or near this garbage bag.
can I have a moment, Judge?
You may.
Pass the witness.
Let's take our first break before we get to cross-examination. 9:58, we'll be back at about 10:15. All rise for the jury. We can go for
before I hand you over to Ms. Reinhardt,
Yes.
were the two casings that were collected, I forget what numbers they are, but
C1 and C200?
yeah, were they tested for rail or slide match?
I do not remember. I don't know that for sure.
When you submitted them for testing, what are you submitting them for testing for?
One, to see if they can tell if they were fired from the same or two different weapons. And those are usually by like the landing groove marks, tool marks that firearms will look at.
Okay, and without saying what the results were, did you get results back on that?
I did.
Thank you. Yeah, the case of it. Cross-examination, Ms. Reinhardt?
Thank you, Judge. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Ortiz and Detective Ortiz.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. Just have a couple of questions. I think that was pretty thorough, well went through.
And Ms. Reinhardt, if you can speak directly into the microphone, I know the jurors had some issues hearing
Okay.
Mr. Duran, so
Sorry.
probably same for you.
All
That's
right.
okay.
You know, at home, I'm not this soft-spoken. Okay, so just a question about the testing that we just were talking about. Can you tell us what the results are?
Of the firearm testing?
Yes. We're having a ballistics expert.
Oh, yes. So for C200 that was located inside the Jeep, is that what you're asking? That was a different weapon that was used from the casing C1 that was located inside the garage.
Okay. And that's the one that was down in the seat? you
Yes,
said?
ma'am.
Okay, all right. And just a couple of questions about the vehicle. Did you test for any bleach or cleaning fluid that might have been used in that vehicle?
No, I did not.
So we don't know for sure if it was ever cleaned or bleached or anything?
That's correct.
Okay. And you took quite a few swabs of the vehicle
Yes.
and there was absolutely nothing that was really usable in terms of that testing.
It was inconclusive.
Inconclusive on all of it. And same with any latent fingerprints, there was nothing that was usable, right?
Correct. There was one fingerprint, but it was still unknown person.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 22, for starters. Ask you if you could take a look at it.
Yes.
Did you take that photograph or have that one as part of your investigation?
Yes.
Okay. Was there any testing done on that rim?
The only thing that was done was just the swabs that were collected from these areas. And so they were tested with DNA, but they also came back inconclusive.
Okay. And didn't you say they also tested the
The tread.
tread on the tire itself?
Yes.
And that was also inconclusive?
Inconclusive as well.
Okay. And just along the same lines with that tire that we are looking at, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibits 23, 24, 25, and 26. And ask you to take a look at those as well. Did you take those photographs?
It was either myself or the crime scene specialist that was with me,
Okay.
but I was present.
Okay. And where is that located? On what street?
This is going to be Paseo de Ladera, so it's going to be one block east of the Vigil residence.
Okay. And why in particular were you directed, or did you, on your own initiative, decide to take photographs of that time?
During the time that we were at the residence, at the Vigil residence, we were advised that this vehicle tire had been located here at this location. So detectives, homicide detectives had asked that we come to this location and look at this vehicle and process it.
And who were those homicide detectives?
At the time, I believe it was Detective Luna.
Oh, Mike Luna?
Yes, that's correct.
Were you also directed by Detective Jose Lucero?
I know that he was present at the scene, but I think the directive came from Detective Luna.
Okay, was he basically the case agent?
Yes, he was a case agent at the time.
Okay, and so he oversaw all of the evidence collection.
I oversaw the evidence collection, but he was in charge of the homicide portion, which would include search warrants and interviews.
Okay, so he's not he's not your supervisor?
No, he's not.
Okay, and looking at the other photographs there,
24.
24, those are just another angle, right?
Yes, so this is going to be looking, a photograph taken northbound, and then where the tire was located.
And the following photograph?
25, just another photograph of the tire that was located on the side.
And if you were traveling to get out of the cul-de-sac area, I think, well, the Vigil home was in a cul-de-sac, right? And then if you were to turn off on that street, what street was this?
This is Paseo de Ladera.
Okay. If you were traveling northbound, would that be on the driver's side or the passenger side?
This side would be the driver's side.
Okay.
If you're traveling northbound on Paseo de Ladera.
Is there anything unusual about that tire just sitting there like that in your mind?
Just that it was discarded there. And
If it was thrown out there, does it strike you odd that there's no rock spillage or anything that might be something heavy was thrown?
yeah, it just looks like it was placed there.
It does look like it was placed there. Okay. All right. Okay, I think that's all questions I have on those. Just want to. That's just a repeat. I'll skip that.
Okay.
Okay. Now, did you also go to the Mesa Ridge Apartments and the Atrisco Apartments?
No, I did not.
Okay, who was in charge of collecting evidence at either of those locations?
I believe that would have been Detective Luna and Detective Lucero.
Okay. Do you know if there was any evidence connected specifically at the Mesa Ridge Apartments?
Not to my knowledge, just possibly video surveillance, but I don't know for sure.
We heard some testimony yesterday that there was a vehicle at the Mesa Ridge Apartments that had a tire removed. Do you have any information about that at all?
I do not.
Photographs?
No, there's no photographs.
And I think the vehicle, they said, was up on blocks because the wheel had been removed.
Oh, okay. No, I don't.
So who would have been in charge of that?
Detective Luna would have had to, if that information was provided, would have to then relay that to us to photograph, or to a crime scene specialist to photograph that.
Okay, do you know if any of the other crime scene specialists went over to that address to take photographs or investigate?
The only person that I know that was dispatched to that area for a auto burglary was crime scene specialist Kelly Sanchez.
Okay.
And I only know that because she then came into our briefing and advised us that there had been, that she responded to a call earlier prior to the shooting call.
Since when we saw the photographs of the tire, wouldn't it have made sense to go figure out if there was a report of an auto burglary where a tire was removed, to go do some further investigation there in terms of taking pictures, looking at the vehicle, maybe taking some swabs of that vehicle?
That would have probably been helpful, but we had no, I did not know of that vehicle.
Okay. Well, weren't you investigating the vehicle or the tire that was left over by the Vigil house?
That was the only item that I was made aware of.
Okay. And did you take that tire into evidence?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right. How about the Trisco apartments? There was a reported attempted burglary of an Escalade at those apartments. I take it you didn't go over to that location either to take photographs?
No, I did not, and I did not know of that
Okay.
reported vehicle.
Who would have been in charge of doing that part of the investigation of the Trisco apartments?
Depending on the information that they had, it would have either been homicide detectives or the field officers that were advising that there were a number of vehicles that were broken into.
Okay. Would that have been also under the purview of Detective
Luna? Correct.
So just a couple questions about the casing in the garage. Let's look at this photograph first, I think. And what exhibit is that?
This is Exhibit 57.
Okay, in 57. Now, you're not an expert in ejection patterns or anything of that nature, are you?
No, I'm not.
But you know a little bit about it.
Yes.
Okay. And you indicate that the person who may have been responsible for that casing being by the yellow rope should have been at the doorway of the garage there?
No, closer to where the,
If you can just point.
sure, closer to where the garbage bag.
Okay, okay.
It could be anywhere
In that area?
in this area here.
Okay. Do you know how far a casing would be ejected to from a particular, where it was fired?
I do not know.
Okay. All right. Since there was the gunshot that we do know of went through the window of the car that's in the threshold of the garage, how could you explain that casing being over there by the yellow rope?
Just that somebody is firing from this side of this position, the ejection from that type of firearm that firearms is advising that fired that casing out. The ejection is on the right hand side, so that it was someplace inside the garage. This casing is actually 5 feet within the threshold of the garage.
So you never found it, well, so it's 5 feet inside.
Yeah, about 5, almost 5.5 feet.
Okay, all right. And you said, just to clarify, ejection usually goes to the right.
On this particular model of the Smith & Wesson, it does eject to the right.
Okay. So with respect to the gunshot hole through the window of the vehicle, did you ever find any casing in the vehicle?
No,
So, and as far as you know, was there any exit wound on Ms. Vigil's injury?
no, there was no exit wound to her head.
Okay. Let's see. Make sure I go hit everything here, I made notes of. So, just so I'm clear, so Detective Luna would have been the individual who would have collected the information from the Trisco apartments.
Either him or somebody from possibly homicide could have been that person.
Okay, and when you do your report, you try to get all of the evidence in, right? Or is it just from the scene at the Vigil home?
All of the evidence, so whatever I am assigned to or in charge with, and I will reflect that on my report of whatever I had control over.
And that was the Vigil home and the Pacific address, right?
Vigil home, Pacific address, and then the search warrant of the Jeep Cherokee.
Okay, all right. And so, what was your thought in terms of the guns involved? Were there one gun, two guns, three guns?
One on this particular one, we only had one casing and then one shot into the vehicle that struck Jacqueline.
Do you know if those casings matched to the same gun?
The C1 did not match to the C200,
Which was the one from?
which was the one from inside the Jeep. There's another casing that was located,
Right.
and
Tell us
that's
about that one.
that casing was that casing was located outside of the Jeep at 437 Pacific. That casing does match C1.
Okay. And just for and I'm one of these people that are informed about ballistics and guns, but what is a casing just for people? It's probably, now that we're done, probably.
So you have the cartridge case, which is what most people refer to as the bullet, but it's a cartridge case. When it is fired through a weapon, the projectile, which is the top portion of the cartridge case, is what comes out of the weapon. The casing, which is left, is then discarded, so it's
That's what we're
ejected out.
talking about.
So the casing that's left after it's been fired, that is what's matching to the other one.
So are we looking at two different guns in this investigation?
So far that there are two different guns that produced or that were fired, not of this casing, but the one that was located inside the Jeep. That is not connected to the C1 that was located.
And we'll probably get a little more into this with the ballistics expert, but is there a big difference between a 40 Smith & Wesson and say a 9mm clock in terms of the bullet?
The caliber's larger, the ejection port is still the same. I can say that it is on the right because at one time I did carry a Glock as well. It is a larger type weapon, but they do make Glocks that can fire 40s and 9mm cartridges.
So the gun can fire both, right? Am I hearing
Correct.
that?
So you can't fire a 9 with a 40 caliber. It has to be a 9mm handgun. A 40mm or 40 caliber handgun has to fire a 40. It will not fire a 9 because of the size of the cartridge.
Okay. And in terms of Ms. Vigil's injuries, would the 40 the fragments were from a 40 that were found?
That is my understanding that and how they do it is they measure and they weigh the grain of that projectile, and that was consistent with a 40.
Okay. And do you know if would a 40 do more damage than a 9?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think that's all the questions I have.
Can you redirect, Mr. Attorney?
Yeah. Somebody made a mess up here. Sorry about that, folks. Detective Ortiz, you were asked on cross, and I'm going to approach and show you exhibit number 25. About how this tire came to rest in that spot. Now, I want to look at that. Well, first of all, let me ask you this: how much does that tire weigh? Did you pick it up?
It was heavy.
It was heavy.
Yeah.
Was it heavy as a tip? I've never lifted a tire before. A wheel tire.
Yeah, I've lifted them before, but it was heavy.
Okay, so maybe 50, 60 pounds.
At least 50 pounds
Okay,
or more.
so it's a 50-pound item. Less than 100.
Less than 100, yes.
Okay, fair enough. And so if it's less than 100, we don't have any indication like rocks being kicked up or anything. We do have some leaves that appear to be there. Do you have any idea how that tire came to rest there?
I do not.
Okay. Let me show you exhibit 5. This is that image of where we believe a vehicle sped out of the neighborhood, kicking up rocks.
Yes. So this is looking, photograph looking south.
So where would the tire marks be for the jury?
So we attempted to indicate it with the cones here. So you're going to see some gravel picked up here, and then this is another area here.
Okay.
This darker area that you can see with the gravel, and then you can see gravel being dispersed.
How much do vehicles weigh, Detective Ortiz?
It depends on the vehicle, but pretty heavy.
Are they heavier than a tire?
Yes, they are.
A lot heavier than a tire?
A lot heavier.
Maybe a couple tons?
Yes.
So a 2-ton vehicle barely makes a mark on those rocks, barely enough that you actually have to mark it with cones,
Yes. So that we can capture the photograph.
and barely kicks up maybe 20 rocks off to the side there.
Yes.
And you're being asked if there's any rocks being kicked up on a 60-pound tire?
Correct.
Okay. Was there any evidence, you were asked on cross about the 2 different caliber, or 2 different casings, one from under the seat, whether it matched any casing at the scene. Was there any evidence at Corte de Loma at all of 2 guns being fired?
No. Just one.
Why do you say that?
We only found one casing, and there's one impact into the vehicle that we located. We did not locate any other impacts in that residence, and that one impact struck Jacqueline in the head.
And was that casing very visible?
Yes, it was.
In other words, would it have been very easy to spot and pick up if I'm a person who might be fleeing the area?
You could.
You have a moment? No further questions.
Okay. Is there any reason why Detective Ortiz may not be excused this time, State?
Yeah, I'm gonna reserve her.
Okay, so Detective Ortiz, you are excused for now. Do not discuss your testimony with anybody who's expected to testify. You are still under subpoena until you're released from the state.
Yes, ma'am.
However, you may be excused at this time.
Thank you.
And State, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Sarah Oates to stand.
Now, if you can raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Right. Okay, now if you can have a seat and get close to the microphone, say your name and spell your last name for the court monitor. Right.
My first name is Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, and the last name is Oates, O-A-T-E-S.
And state and make it.
Thank you. Good morning. Ms. Oates, where do you work?
I work for the Albuquerque Police Department.
And what is your job there?
Currently, I'm a police officer with the Albuquerque Police Department.
And how long have you worked at the Albuquerque Police Department?
So I've worked with the Albuquerque Police Department since April of 2015.
What was your job when you started there?
When I started with the Albuquerque Police Department, I was actually a civilian crime scene specialist.
And that was 2015. Tell us how you became an officer and when that happened.
Sure. So I was hired as a crime scene specialist in April of 2015. And then I stayed in that position until January of 2020. And then that's when I did the police academy.
And when you were a crime scene specialist, what is the role of a crime scene specialist? What do you do?
So a crime scene specialist responds to crime scenes, and their main job is to identify, document, collect, and preserve physical evidence.
And is there some training for that?
Yes.
And did you complete, what does that training teach you?
So when I was hired, I did, I believe it was about 7 to 8 weeks of training just to get familiar with the police department in general, but then there's also an 80-hour, what's called a field investigator course, and that's what teaches us everything that we would need to know as a crime scene specialist. The term field investigator and crime scene specialist are basically the same.
And so during your training, do you learn things like how to collect evidence without contaminating it and preserve everything?
Yes.
Okay. Photography,
Yes.
all the things you need to collect a piece of evidence and keep it in its pristine condition, is that fair?
Yes.
And before you worked for the Albuquerque Police Department, do you have some educational background as well?
Yes, so I went to Eastern New Mexico University, where I got a bachelor's degree in biology and a minor in chemistry.
Now, since you became an officer in 2020,
Yes.
what is your role at the police department been since there? What do you do as an officer?
As an officer, I currently work in the Field Services Bureau, so I'm the one that responds to the calls that come in from the public.
Now, going back to November of 2019, that's before you became an officer, so you were still a crime scene specialist?
Yes, that's correct.
And on November 27th of 2019, did you receive a request to assist with a scene involving a Jeep Grand Cherokee?
Yes.
And where was that vehicle located? What was the address?
So I was dispatched to 437 Pacific Avenue Southwest.
Okay. And that's in Albuquerque, New Mexico?
Yes.
And when you arrived at that specific address, was there anyone else on the scene?
When I arrived, I spoke with Detective Lucero, and they were in the alleyway that was to the north of that actual physical address.
Okay. And when you got there, a detective was there, but what was your role going to be? What was your job?
So my role as the crime scene specialist was to seal a vehicle to preserve for evidence, and then Detective Lucero also had told me they had noted some items that they also requested be collected.
May I approach your honor?
You may.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification. It states 101 through 109, and then we've already admitted 110. So then we'll go 111 through 126, and then just to make things more fun, 98. So I'm going to have you just take a look at these and tell me if you recognize these photos and this item, and I'll give you just a moment to do so.
And Ms. Taylor, you said 101 to 109 and then 111 through.
I have no idea what I said, so we're going to go with 101 through 109, and then 111 through 126, and then 98, which was tendered early, but not admitted. You recognize that?
Yes,
Okay. Do all of these photos, do you recognize all these photos?
I do.
Okay. And do these depict the scene at Pacific when you were there executing your duties as a crime scene specialist for that, that Jeep? And what about 98? Do you recognize that? Is that something you collected from the scene?
Yes.
The casing? Your Honor, the state would move for admission states 101 through 109, and then 111 through 126, and also 98.
Defense, any position?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, the court will admit states exhibits 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, 121, 122, 123, 124, 125, and 126 into evidence without objection from defense. You may publish those at this time. The court will admit states exhibit number 98 at this time. It was previously published.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, so, officer, let me ask you, let me show you, let's publish states, let's do a good one here. Let's take a look at 101 first, and I'm going to put this under this camera, and you can see on the screen what's on that big screen too. So, let's look at 101 and then 105. Can you tell us, you said you came into an alley?
Yes.
Okay. Was this, if I showed you a map of this area, would you be able to point out where you entered into this scene?
I'm not sure.
Okay, let's try. And if not, that's okay. How long ago was this? 2019?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's okay. So here is Pacific, and here's our address. This is States 20. Do you remember, did you enter in from the front side, or you said there was an alley?
I don't recall entirely. I don't believe I went in this way.
Okay, so this alley back here,
Correct.
somewhere into here? Okay. So tell us just generally, let the jury know how when you arrive, and let me actually, this one might be a little more backed up. Let me show you what's been admitted already as 17, it's a little further back. So tell me the process when you come into this scene and you have all this dirt. How do you process? Like, what do you do to make sure you don't kick stuff or move stuff around? What are you doing? How do you scan the area?
So in regards to photography, when I get to a scene, the standard way to do photographs would be like overalls first, which is I guess what's depicted in this photograph. I'll do an overall of what that scene looks like when I get there. And then as items are located, the next set of photographs that I would do are called mid-range photographs, and that just kind of shows everything in relation to each other. And then the third type of photograph would be the close-up photographs, which is where you would see the item more zoomed in, so you know exactly what item I'm photographing.
So as you go through this scene, you located some items in this sort of dirt area, is that right?
The detectives have told me about them, yes.
They saw some? Okay, and you found them as well?
Yes, I photographed those.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted now as 102. Can you tell us what's in this picture?
Yes, so that's a picture of the casing that they had told
And
me
you
they
can you
located.
point to it with your finger?
Yes.
That's a casing?
Yes.
And then 103, what is different about this one?
So in this photograph, right here, the difference is that once I do the initial overall mid-range and close-up photographs, indicators were placed to help, again, when I do the next set of the overall mid-range and close-up photographs, to show where those items are. So the difference in this photo is just that I placed that indicator card.
Okay, and this, what is written on this card?
It's a C and then a dash.
What does a C mean to you?
So a C is what we use to indicate that that is a casing.
Okay, and how come you didn't assign it a number at this time?
So I didn't assign it a number at this time because Detective Oates was the primary detective that was in charge, and I wasn't sure what items she had collected, what number she's on, so I didn't want to run the risk of potentially labeling the same as something she had collected. That's why it was left blank.
Okay, so did she assign numbers later?
I believe so.
Okay. I'm going to show you 104. Is this one of your close-up photos?
Correct.
Okay. And that's also showing the same casing?
Yes.
Let's go to 106. Now, this is backed up a little, but I see a couple tents. Can you tell us which one of those was the casing?
I can't tell from this photograph, but that would be a mid-range showing where those items were located.
If you look closely here, can you tell what this item was?
It
And you
looks
can
like
pick it
it
up
might be one of the screws that they had told me about just from.
Okay. So this is a screw, and you're not sure what this is. Let's look at 107, and you can pick that one up. Can you point out the 3 markers in this photo?
Yes, so there's a marker here, a marker there, and another marker right there.
Okay, and this marker here, I think you said was a screw from our last photo.
I believe so.
And what about this one? Are you able to see?
It also looks like that might be the screw.
Okay. And so how many well, let's keep going. So how many screws did you locate?
2.
Okay, I'm going to show you 108. Is that one of them?
Yes.
And 126.
Yes.
That's the second screw.
Yes.
Did you locate anything else on the ground?
I believe the only other item that was collected was an old firearm cleaning brush.
Okay. I have it. Let me find it. Okay, I'm going to show you 119. What is that thing?
That would be the firearm cleaning brush.
Okay. And then 120. And if you need to pick these up, you can.
That's the same firearm cleaning brush with the indicator.
Okay. And 121.
Oops. The close-up photograph of that.
Okay. So in the dirt outside of the vehicle, just to be clear, tell us the things that you located, the 4 things.
So the items that were outside of the vehicle were the casing, 2 separate black screws, and then the firearm cleaning brush.
Okay. Now, when you located those items, can you tell the jury a little bit we've seen how you took photos of them and marked them with markers and took photos back. How did you actually collect them? What are you wearing? How do you make sure that everything is not contaminated?
We wear gloves when we collect any items.
And what do you put them into?
Evidence bags, plastic bags.
Okay. And let's go ahead to 98. I think this will be a good example. Can you go ahead and pull that out? Okay. And then you can actually put that here. Can you just explain to the jury, let me pull that back just a little bit, like what are all these what does all this writing mean to you, just in general?
So the writing on the bag is the case number, the type of call that it is in relation to, the address where the item was collected, a brief description of what that item is, the date and the time, and then my initials and my man number.
Okay. So what is this? What is 98 here? What's that?
So this is the casing that I had collected from the alley.
Okay. And then I'm going to just give you these, and I'm going to ask you to hold them, and then we'll put them under the camera one at a time, and you can just explain to the jury what we're seeing. So starting with 109.
I'll just look this.
Yep, perfect. So what is 109?
So 109 is one of the overall photographs that I took of the Jeep prior to sealing it.
When you got to the scene and saw this Jeep, was there anything notable about this Jeep?
I had noted that the front end, like the panels and the hood were missing from it, as well as some of the windows were partially rolled down.
Okay, you can go to the next, which is, let's see on there. That's 110. What's this?
So same as the last one, this is just a different overview of that side of the vehicle, again showing the condition that it was in, so the windows being partially open, and then the missing part of the front of the vehicle.
Okay, 111.
This would be the same type of photograph, just a different angle again depicting the condition the vehicle was in when I arrived.
Okay. 112.
This would be considered a close-up of the front of the vehicle.
113.
113 is a picture of the VIN of the vehicle, which again is something that I would photograph when I photograph any vehicle. Always try to document the VIN and the license plate of the vehicle.
114.
The front of the vehicle.
And is this what you're talking about, the missing parts to it?
Yes, just to document how that front end looked.
Okay. I believe that's 115.
Same, this is another overall of the other side of the Jeep.
116.
This is a different angle, but the same side that we had just seen prior to this photo.
So why are we taking so many pictures?
Sometimes I take a lot of photos.
Not judging why.
No,
Just asking.
Just to document different angles, or in this case, like I said, there is the front end missing, so I just wanted to document it and the exterior of that vehicle, and make sure that I got all visible areas, so like the top, the middle, and the bottom.
Okay, keep going. So 117, you talked about documenting the license plate and the VIN. What do we have here?
So this was a photograph of where a license plate should be, but I took it just to document that there was no license plate on this vehicle.
Okay. Now this photo has some different things going on. Can you explain all this plastic and writing and little yellow guys?
Yes, so the photographs that I had just gone through are the way that the vehicle was when I arrived to the scene. This is the vehicle once I was done sealing it. So that's why there's now plastic covering any of the openings to the vehicle. The yellow that you see are seals to go over any openings. And then the white writing is along the same lines of the writing on the plastic bags, where it again has the case number, the location, the date, the time, information for the detectives in the case.
So this is like a big piece of evidence, so you're marking it.
Correct.
And these little seals, what's the point of those?
So those are to, am I able to flip?
Yeah.
With that mic?
Yeah.
So basically the seals just go over any opening, so I put them over a door, so if the door was to open, the seal would break.
So later on, someone could tell if that had been opened since you did this process to it.
Correct.
Okay. And let's take a look, keep going to 123. What is that showing?
So this is the same style of photograph as the other ones. This is just showing that it is sealed and where those seals are.
So you're sealing here every window, the back door, the gas tank, every single place that someone could maybe access inside the vehicle. Your little yellow tape, make sure that you can tell.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's look at 124. Same thing here, just more documenting your seals.
Yes.
And 125.
Same
Okay.
concept.
Like these. What's that last one? 120. Oh, that's 118. That's not even in the right order. What is 118?
118 looks like a photograph once they sealed the vehicle, just to show the area again.
Okay, so this is at the end. I see you have seals here, and you've collected now the items off the ground.
I believe so.
Did you do any searching of the inside of this Jeep before you sealed it up at this location?
No.
And what about the outside of the Jeep? Did you do anything to that to see if there was evidence on the outside of the Jeep?
Yes, I did.
What did you do and when did you do it?
So after I took the overall photographs of the Jeep as it was when I arrived, I processed the exterior only. I never went inside of the Jeep. but what that consists of is taking swabs for any potential DNA from the exterior of the Jeep. So I had collected swabs from the handle of the driver door on the exterior side of the rear driver door, the gas notch cover, the trunk handle, and then the rear door handles on the passenger side. So the exterior side of the rear passenger door as well as the exterior handle of the passenger door.
And when you say swabs, are these swabs for DNA, potential DNA?
Correct. And then I also processed it for latent fingerprints.
Okay, and tell us about
So when I process the vehicle for latent fingerprints, we use fingerprint powder and a brush, and basically process the exterior of the vehicle and see if we locate anything.
And when you do the swabs, and if you had, found any latent prints, those items are all packaged the way you've described into evidence bags, labeled, sealed up, and then those were turned over to Detective Ortiz?
Correct.
Did you ever find at this scene any of those missing pieces to the Jeep that we see taken off the front end? The hood or the side fenders, were those located anywhere around here?
I don't know. Not that
As far as you know, were they located?
I don't know.
And you said you looked for latents. Did you find any latents?
I believe I got it latent from the trunk area of the vehicle.
After all of this process is done and the seals are on and the windows are taped shut, what happened to that vehicle?
So once it was sealed, that vehicle was towed to the crime lab, and then placed inside the garage where it could be secured.
Thank you so much, Officer. I'll pass it on.
Cross-examination from defense.
Just a moment. Let's see. Most of these are here that I want to talk about. Let's try this. Okay, I'm going to have you take a look.
Do you need this one now?
I think I'll pull this one back. Actually, I think I'll look at this one. Take a look at, what is that, 109, 107?
107.
Okay.
Okay, Miss Oates, officer, is it officer?
Miss Oates is fine. Yes, it's officer.
Crime scene specialist. Was this the only crime scene that you were asked to attend to
Yes.
in this case?
Yes.
Okay. So in looking at Exhibit 107 here, that's looks like a yard for 2 or 3 vehicles, right? It's a pretty big space.
Yeah. Yes.
Did you ever investigate on any other day whether there were other vehicles that were parked in that driveway
No.
or yard? Okay. And I see on 107 here you have a evidence tent that appears to be out in the alleyway.
Okay. Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it looks like there's a certain amount of debris in this yard, right?
Like the leaves and.
Just papers and other, I'm not sure what all's there, but it looks like there's
Yes.
leaves and general yard stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, how can you say that that casing has anything to do with the Jeep?
I can't.
Okay, all right. And let's look at another one here, it's a little closer up. 106.
And just
you ever talk with any of the other neighbors to see if they use the yard there, or that other individuals could have been in and out of that yard, because it doesn't appear to be closed off?
No, I did not talk to any neighbors.
Okay. And it looks like there's a bunch of debris in the corner, and the two tents, the three tents, I guess.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so do you have any way to connect the different tents that you placed in that yard to each other?
What do you mean by
I mean, how do you know they're connected with this case?
Oh, I don't know what they
Okay.
were or not.
And did you ever speak to any of the neighbors on either side? If that yard was used by other individuals or other vehicles parked there?
No, I didn't speak to any
Okay,
neighbors.
do you know anyone that did?
I don't.
Who would have been in charge of canvassing this area in terms of neighbors?
I'm not sure.
Okay, would it have been Detective Lucero?
He's the one that I spoke with when I got there. As far as what his duty was, or anyone else's, I'm not sure.
And do you recall what date this was?
This was on November 27th, 2019.
Okay, so it was a little over a week since the murder took place, right?
I'm not sure of
Okay.
how long that time frame was.
Okay. You said you did take the latent from the back of the truck.
Correct.
Do you know what happened? Then you're talking about a fingerprint.
Yes.
Okay. And did you ever get that processed?
I turned that over to Detective Ortiz as well, and I don't know what happened
Okay.
as far as that.
Okay. Let's see. I think that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Officer, do you know who lived at 437 Pacific, the address where this took place?
No, I don't.
Would it have been your job to go interview those people?
No.
Would it have been your job to interview neighbors?
No.
What was your job here?
So, like I said, when I was a crime scene specialist, my job was to respond, collect the items that the detectives had requested, and then seal that vehicle for evidence.
And why did you choose to collect these items? The screws, the casing, and the firearm cleaning brush?
Again, the detective that I spoke with when I arrived is the one who advised me of those items.
So the detectives were sort of assisting?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. And any reason Officer Oates may not be excused at
There's
this
not,
time?
Your Honor, thank you.
In defense?
I'm fine, please.
Okay, so you're released at this time. Do not discuss your testimony with anybody who's expected to testify, but you're free to go. You're not being reserved for this trial.
Thank you.
Okay, State, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor.
About that.
State calls Jill Prather.
Okay. Now, can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, now if you can have a seat, speak directly into the microphone, say your name and spell your last name for the court monitor to my right.
Jill Prather, Prather.
And you may continue, Mr. Duran.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Prather. I want to ask you a few questions this morning. First, starting with what it is that you do.
I am a firearm and toolmark examiner.
What is a firearm and toolmark examiner?
We analyze evidence that pertain to tool marks. So tool marks is the overarching science. Firearms is a subset within that. And basically what we're looking at is tool marks, comparing them to tools and trying to determine a common origin, or you would probably call it a match in layman's terms. Does this match that?
Okay, so as an example, I have a spade shovel. I jam it into a wooden 2x4 and it leaves a divot. You'd be able to potentially analyze something like that for a tool marking?
Potentially, yes, depending on the blade and the quality of the tool mark that's left over in the substrate, then yes.
And you said that firearms is a subset of tool marks. How so?
Correct. So a firearm is actually a tool. It's a tool in the sense that it is a harder object striking or coming into contact with a softer object and leaving a mark. The important thing to know about firearms is while the firearm acts as the tool, the harder object, it is also composed of several parts, and those individual parts within the firearm also act as tools in and of themselves. So you're looking at a tool, the firearm, but you're also looking at several different tool marks that could be made from that one tool because of all of the smaller tools inside of it.
Let's talk about your training and experience in firearm and tool marks examination. First, tell us about your education, please.
I hold a bachelor's degree in biology from Eastern New Mexico University, and I hold master's degrees in both public health as well as forensic biochemistry.
And from where did you get your degrees?
The master's of public health was from the University of Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha, Nebraska, and the Master of Science in Forensic Science, which is the biochemistry, I got from Nebraska Wesleyan University in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Okay. If you can tell us a little bit about your training now in firearms and tool marks examination.
Sure. So there isn't really like a college or a trade school that you can go to be a firearms examiner. It's really something that is taught through training and experience. So initially I started out as a lab tech in the lab in Oregon, and there is where I learned basic firearm stuff, taking firearms apart, cleaning firearms, the parts, and I worked in their NIBIN system, so getting familiar with ammunition and tool marks in and of itself.
What's NIBIN?
So NIBIN is the National Integrated Ballistics Information System. It's an automated system that's used to compare cartridge cases from various shootings to one another. So I started out in that, and then progressed throughout the lab and got the job in Albuquerque as a firearm and tool mark examiner, which is kind of like the next step up from being a lab tech. And from there I had several different avenues of training. The first of which was federal training. So I went to the NFEA, which is the National Firearm Examiner Academy.
When was that?
That would have been in 2017 going into 2017. We started in the fall of 2016. We completed that in the fall of 2017.
Okay.
And that is an academy specifically for firearm and tool mark analysis. So it's a class, the first portion of which you complete through distance. They ask you to do research, write papers, various experiments in your home lab. And then the second portion of it is actually hands-on training in Maryland with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. You spend 4 months there basically just looking through a microscope, looking at tool marks, looking at bullets, looking at cartridge cases, taking guns apart. And then the final element of that training is a mock court where the jurors, the attorneys, the judge are composed of seasoned firearm and tool mark examiners who are respected in the field. And it's basically like the most grueling experience you could probably ever go through as a professional. So I completed that, and then when I got back to Albuquerque, then the Albuquerque lab put me through their training program.
What's the Albuquerque's lab's Albuquerque Labs training program?
So it's basically about a year long. I was able to do part of it while I was with the National Academy, but it's more looking through microscopes, more tool marks, more comparisons. But then in addition to all of that, there are what we call competency tests. And a competency test is something where your most senior examiner or your trainer creates a mock case file. So they know the answers. They know what guns were involved, they know what cartridge cases were involved, what tools were used, what the tool marks are. They've created an entire fake case for you to work. And you work it and they evaluate whether or not you got the answers correct. And then you do another mock court based on that case or cases. Sometimes they give you multiple cases.
So it's like a large-scale examination.
Yeah, it all in all, the entire training process, I did it in about 18 months to 2 years. And that's about approximately how long it takes to train an examiner.
And from when to when was that?
So I started in Albuquerque. I think I got hired on in like August of 2016. And then I think I completed my training, it would have been like January of 2018.
Have you ever taught any courses yourself?
Yes, I actually teach at AFTE, which is the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners. It's the #1 conference. It's the professional training for people that do what I do. I've taught there several times workshops in distance determination, which is another part of firearms examination that we perform in the lab. And I've also trained crime scene techs, I've trained officers, I've trained law enforcement folks all throughout APD.
Okay. And have you ever published any papers or writings in your field?
Yeah, I published a paper in the field of distance determination.
Okay, and when was that?
Oh, I'd have to check. I think it was 2019 that it was actually published.
And where was it published?
In the AFTE journal, so the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners. They put out a journal. It's a peer-reviewed scientific journal, so that article goes to other examiners. They read it, make sure that it's scientifically sound and accurate, and if it passes that test, then it gets published.
Do you have any certifications or specialize in any sort of trainings?
I don't hold any certifications, no.
Okay. Have you ever been recognized as an expert in firearms and tool marks examination in the court of law?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
I think probably about a half a dozen times, 5, 6 times.
Okay. And in what courts have you been recognized as an expert?
The second judicial here in Albuquerque.
Was that every time?
Yes.
Have you ever testified outside of the second judicial district?
I don't believe so.
Okay. At this time, the state would offer Ms. Prather as an expert in firearms tool marks examination.
Your Honor, we have no objection to that.
Okay, I'm writing down which she's going to be certified as an expert in first. And so there's no objection from defense. Ms. Prather will be certified as an expert by this court in firearms and tool mark examination.
Okay. So, were you asked to do any sort of examinations in this case?
Yes.
Okay, what were you asked to do?
Some comparison work in some cartridge cases and some fired bullet components.
Okay, and so before we get into what you did, I want to talk a little bit about how it's done,
Okay.
and what I call the anatomy of a bullet.
Okay.
Okay, now I see you either have a coffee mug or a mock bullet. What is it?
This is a very oversized model of a complete cartridge.
Okay, so if we can use that as a demonstrative aid.
Any objection from defense?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. So what are we looking at here?
So what you're looking at is a cartridge. Most people in the common world call this a bullet. They are wrong. So what you are...
I call it a bullet. Anatomy of a cartridge.
It is the anatomy of a cartridge. So...
In just one moment. Defense, if you need to move around to see better, you certainly may.
Oh. So what you're looking at is a cartridge. This is what you buy in the store. This is the ammunition component to a firearm. What you're looking at here is basically a very large mock-up of basic handgun ammunition, okay? So a cartridge is composed of 4 main parts. You have the primer here, which is seated in the head of the cartridge case. So this is the cartridge case. The cartridge case holds gunpowder or propellant, and a bullet is seated in the mouth of that cartridge case. So you have a bullet, cartridge case, primer, powder, okay? 4 main parts. When you put this into a firearm to fire it, it will look like this. When it is fired through a firearm, the firing pin strikes the primer here, makes a little tool mark, a little stamp or a little indentation, if you will, and that creates a little bit of a shock, and it makes a spark which lights the powder that's inside the cartridge case. That powder creates a lot of pressure and gas, forcing the bullet down the barrel of the firearm. So this goes downrange out of the gun. And this cartridge case, depending on what kind of handgun you're using, will be ejected or remain in the cylinder of a revolver.
So if we're talking about, and that brings me to my next question, what is the difference between a revolver and a semi-automatic weapon?
A revolver is what you see in cowboy movies. There is a cylinder that spins, and it holds all of the cartridges in that cylinder. And every time the trigger is pulled, that cylinder advances. A bullet is fired down the barrel of the gun, but the cartridge remains in that cylinder. So if you think about cowboy movies, John Wayne, they get into a gunfight and they bail behind a building and you can see them pushing something out of the gun. It's these fired cartridge cases so that they can reload. And then new unfired ammunition goes back into the cylinder, they close it and they fire it. So with a revolver, cartridge cases are not ejected. That's the important takeaway here. Because in contrast, in a semi-automatic pistol, what happens is the bullet's fired, it goes down the barrel of the gun, but the slide, or the top portion of the firearm, runs rearward, and when it runs rearward, it forces this cartridge case out, and it flies to the side. So it's ejected out of the firearm and goes onto the ground or the surrounding area, wherever that firearm's been fired.
Other than a semi-automatic type weapon, or for that matter, a revolver, are there any other types of weapons generally that either retain or eject cartridge casings?
Yeah, so there's rifles and there's shotguns, derringers. Derringers are also handguns, but the cartridge cases, again, remain inside. Those are the really small pistols. Again, old cowboy movies, really small pistol. There's usually a couple of cartridges that can be loaded into it, but the cartridge case is not ejected from those. Shotguns and rifles, we're talking about long guns, and this bullet isn't a great representation of what a rifle or...
Those are usually like
yes,
a couple inches long, maybe.
They're typically much longer, and shotgun shells are plastic. They're usually colored green, red, yellow, and they're short, and they don't have a bullet seated in the mouth.
Okay. And so for the purposes of our examination today, we're dealing with a semi-automatic handgun, is that correct?
Yes, we're talking about semi-automatic handgun.
Okay. So let's continue on with the anatomy of the cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual bullet now, it does have some striations on it, the model that we have here.
Yes.
However, what happens when it travels down the barrel of the gun?
So remember at the very beginning, I said tool marks. It's the study of a harder object coming into contact with a softer object and making a mark. That in essence is a tool mark. When we talk about firearms and ammunition, the gun acts as a tool. It's hard. Stainless steel, whatever it's made out of, okay? Bullets, by contrast, are very soft. They are very malleable. Most bullets in modern ammunition have a lead core. It's
which lead is a very soft metal. It's a metal, but you can actually scratch it with your fingernail. It's so soft. That lead bullet is usually jacketed or covered with another metal, typically brass, copper. Sometimes they're plated, but again, we're talking about soft metal. So we have this soft metal bullet that's traveling down a hard metal barrel. That barrel has raised and lowered areas inside of it. That's called rifling. Rifling imparts spin. Spin on a bullet makes it accurate. It's just like if you throw a football. If you throw a football and you've got some good spin on it, it goes far, it's very accurate, and you can hit the receiver. It's the same thing with a bullet. If you impart spin on a bullet, you make it more accurate. That's why there's rifling in the barrel of a firearm.
So I like to incorporate pop culture. If we're talking about, like, we used to see the old 007 entrances, every movie in 007 stops with and there's like looking down the barrel of the gun. That's the rifling that we see, or the spiraling of the barrel is what you're talking about.
Correct. That is conventionally rifled rifling.
Got it.
That's what you're going to see. So if I hold this bullet up, maybe if I put it, can you see there's a raised and lowered area as I spin? These are called land and groove impressions. They are made by that rifling in the barrel of the firearm, okay? These are tool marks. The reason they are tool marks is because when a barrel is made, the tool that makes the rifling inside the barrel leaves little tiny microscopic markings, okay? Those little tiny microscopic markings are imparted on the bullet as the bullet travels down the barrel. So that is the tool mark that we're looking at. So when I talk about comparing bullets or looking at bullets, this is specifically what I'm interested in, these lands and grooves, okay? By that same token, cartridge cases can also take up tool marks. Cartridge cases are typically made out of brass, sometimes they're aluminum or nickel, some of the older stuff is steel, but essentially it's the same principle. You have a softer metal seated in a tool that's made of a harder metal, and it's taking up tool marks as that firearm comes into contact with the various parts of the cartridge case.
So where are we going to see those tool marks on a casing?
There are actually a ton of marks on cartridge cases. The ones that are big and obvious that we look at first, the firing pin impression. It's made basically like a stamp. A firing pin, when you pull the trigger on a firearm, the firing pin comes out, slams into the primer of the cartridge case, and it makes this nice little mark, okay?
And the firing pin, is that going to be unique to a firearm, or are all firing pins the same?
Nope, it's going to be unique to the firearm, because in the same way that a barrel is made with some sort of tool, a firing pin is made with some sort of tool or mechanized process. So those firing pins have little unique indentations in them. A lot of them look like, under the microscope, they look like kind of like an orange peel, the little indentations and the little marks, valleys and grooves, if you will. So that's a firing pin impression. Then we have what's called breech face marks. And so this is the head of my cartridge case. So in a semi-automatic pistol, so the firing pin comes out and it strikes the primer. But this whole cartridge case is supported inside the firearm, and it's butted up against a flat surface, which is called the breech face of the firearm. Same song, different verse. That breech face is made with some sort of tool or some sort of mechanic process. So it also has microscopic furrows and ridges in it that will be pressed into the head of the cartridge case.
Almost like putting a thumbprint into a surface and transferring it.
Right, so it's like sticking your finger in peanut butter and pulling it out. You're gonna make a little stamp, and your fingerprint or parts of your fingerprint can be visible in whatever you stuck it in, wax, peanut butter, chocolate, whatever. So firing pin impression, breech face impression. We also have what's called firing pin aperture shear.
What the heck is firing aperture shear?
So the hole that the firing pin comes out of, we have the breech face, right? The breech face has a hole in it where the firing pin comes out so it can strike the primer. In semi-automatic pistols, after this cartridge has been fired, the bullet goes down the barrel, there's a little bit of an unlocking process that happens in the slide of the pistol. And that little bit of a drop can shear or cut part of this metal here.
So this is happening within milliseconds, I'm assuming, of the,
Yes.
the firing of the weapon.
Yes.
And it's where the slide starts to pop back? And is it where the casing now is being ejected?
Just before the casing is ejected. So the bullet's fired, it goes down the barrel, and at that instant, there's a little bit of a locking to hold all that gas and all that pressure to force that bullet down the barrel. And then without us even knowing, without the shooter even paying attention, it unlocks a little bit, and the barrel and the slide come apart. That's what allows the cartridge case to be ejected. But just before it's ejected, at that little unlocking point in the firing cycle, this cartridge case can bump just a little bit, and that hole where the firing pin comes out can shear a little bit of that metal off. So it's like if you were to take a butter knife and slide it through butter, you see those striated marks, those long, pretty even lines in that butter when you cut it. Same thing.
Okay. And so, as far as the projectile goes, we talked a little bit about lands and grooves.
Mm-hmm.
Are the lands and grooves going to be similarly unique, or are they all uniform throughout all weapons?
They are very unique. Depending on the way that the barrel was made, is kind of telling of what kind of marks you're going to see on the lands and grooves. Firearms are like any other consumer product. Some of them are more high quality than others. Some of them mark better than others. Just like cars, some people take better care of their guns than others. Damage, use, abuse, fouling, or the dirtiness of the gun can impact how well the bullet is marked. But from all research, all indications point to that all bullets are differently in different firearms.
What about weight? That's sort of a different realm, but also a unit of measure that I think can be telling sometimes. Tell the jury a little bit about how weight can have an impact on determining matching a projectile to a firearm.
Yeah, so it's not just a matter of weight, it's also a matter of whether or not the correct caliber is fired in the correct gun.
Okay.
So ammunition is a vast field. There are many different sizes. There are calibers that were created in the United States that are measured one way. There are calibers that are created in other parts of the world that are measured in a different unit. But what it comes down to is this measurement here, the diameter of the bullet. That tells you the caliber. The diameter of the bullet is the same as the diameter of the barrel that it's meant to be fired down. So that's number one. If the bullet fits well in the barrel, it's going to mark better than if it's kind of wobbling in there, okay? The weight of the bullet, you can have in .40 caliber, you can have a 160 grain weight bullet, you can have a 180 grain bullet. At the end of the day, how the markings, the highest quality of markings are due to how well the bullet fits in the barrel and how well that particular ammunition marks and how well that particular barrel marks.
So you talked before about the consistency of a bullet being very soft, metal,
Yes.
also covered or jacketed by another different type of soft metal.
Yes.
So do they typically stay intact when they impact something?
It depends. So it depends on what they strike. So a jacketed bullet, what we're looking at right here, essentially, is what we would call a full metal jacket bullet. Assume that the inside of this is full of lead. If you took a bullet that's got a full metal jacket and you look at it, you can see a little lead base and you can see the jacket on the outside. Okay. If we were talking total metal jacket, the base would also be covered with the jacket as well. So let's just say for a moment that we're talking with a full metal jacketed bullet. Lead inside, copper outside, both take up tool marks extremely well. But if I shoot this into something soft or liquid, like water or ballistics gelatin or cotton or a pillow, my bullet's going to stay intact. There really isn't too much force on it to cause it to come apart. Now, if I were to fire this bullet into asphalt, cement, through a window, through drywall, through a cinder block, what could happen is I could defeat this outer jacketing material, causing it to split or splinter, and I can have what we call core and jacket separation, where you would find pieces or a portion of the jacket in one area and the bullet in another, the lead core in another.
Okay. And so you had mentioned glass as one of those types of hard surfaces that could potentially fracture a projectile, or is that the term you use? Or
Fragment.
fragment, yeah. Even if a projectile is fragmented, can it still be of use to you if you were able to get a majority of the fragmented pieces together?
Absolutely.
Also,
Even a small fragment of a bullet can hold a lot of data. So if we're looking at these lands and grooves, obviously these land impressions and these groove areas, what we're looking at here is a very large demonstrative aid. But even if, let's say for example, a bullet fragments and all I get is this little piece right here, and I have a land impression and a little bit of a groove on either side, that gives me an abundance of information. I can measure that land impression. It could potentially tell me some indicators as to what calibers I could be looking at. In addition to the actual tool mark itself, that one small area holds a lot of these little striated marks. So it's still enough to make a comparison. Whether or not it's enough to come to a conclusion is another matter, but there is definitely enough there to make a comparison.
okay. So before we shift gears, is there anything else about the anatomy of this cartridge or bullet or anything else that we haven't talked about yet that would be telling, particularly with the analysis that you did in this case? Did I miss anything?
The only thing is, so far we've talked about full metal jacketed bullets. In this case, we'll discuss a hollow point bullet.
I forgot. You're right. Let's talk about that.
And it's still the same idea. It's still a projectile. It's still loaded into a cartridge case. It still can be fired from a semi-automatic pistol. We're all the same there. The only difference is the construction of the bullet. A hollow point bullet is made to expand when it comes into contact with soft or liquid material. So the way it's constructed is there's a hole in the nose of the bullet. That nose gets full of ballistic gelatin or water, and it's forced open and it peels back and it has petals. And those petals curve back. That's the jacketing as well as that lead core that bends back. But just like our full metal jacket that we were talking about before, you can still have core and jacket separation.
So what happens if a what happens if a hollow point projectile hits a hard surface? You talked about what happens on a soft surface. What happens on a hard surface like glass?
So, first point to note is even a very small amount of liquid can cause a hollow point to expand and open up. If I shot into that wall over there, but it passed through my water bottle, that is still enough liquid to force that hollow point open, okay? If it doesn't pass through any sort of liquid or soft material, animal, human, whatever, it will stay, there will still be a hole in the top of it or a little concave area, and it won't open up. It has to have that liquid to peel back those petals and to force that bullet open.
So typically, passing through a hard surface, harder than, say glass, for example, it would still likely remain, it wouldn't open up, those petals wouldn't open up as you described before.
Glass would not force the petals open. You have to have some sort of liquid or something that acts like a liquid. Jello, flesh, something like that.
And then once it hits that softer material, liquid material, then it would definitely expand and potentially separate the fragment.
Correct.
May we approach, Judge?
Yes, please.
Yeah, we're gonna show.
$11:47. If you want to come back at 1, we'll resume at 1:15. During recess, do not discuss this case with any other jurors or with any other person, or allow anyone to discuss this case with you or in your presence. Avoid any publicity this case may receive. Do not read, listen to, or watch any news accounts of this trial. Do not express any opinions about this case or form any fixed opinion until the case is finally submitted to you for your decision. All rise for the jury. Anything from the state before we break for lunch? We can address it momentarily if you need to.
This afternoon, Judge, we are going to have issues